Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we're continuing our series of the Brothers War set review for Limited and Constructed. This video is part 5 and we're covering all the green cards. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it, starting with the commons, and let's see what they have. First common is Argothian Opportunist. It's for 2 and a green. It's a creature, human scout, 3/2 power and toughness. And when Argothian Opportunist enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. Yeah, that's pretty good. You're going to get some value out of that with the Power Stone token. Plus, it's a decent body for attacking, and even blocking. But I have a sense that big mana is going to be required for a lot of these huge artifacts, and getting that extra Power Stone token always helps. So I think I'm going to go ahead and give it a mid-level rating for Limited. And I think probably go low in Constructed. You'll probably see the greater benefit of using the Power Stone tokens in Limited. For Constructed, there are just so many options and at the 3-drop spot, and I'm not quite sure if this would make the cut in a Constructed deck. Maybe in Commander, but you'll probably see this used more often in Limited. Like I said, there's some big artifacts and also some pricey activated abilities that these Power Stone tokens would be good to use for them. So we'll go mid for Limited, low for Constructed. Our next card is Argothian Sprite for 1 and a green. It's a creature, fairy, 2/2 power and toughness. Argothian Sprite can't be blocked by artifact creatures. And if you pay 7 for the activated ability, put 2 +1/+1 encounters on Argothian Sprite. So there you go. There's a good example of a pretty expensive activated cost, and those Power Stone tokens will really help reduce the weightiness of that activation cost. You might be able to activate it a lot more often than you might realize with having Power Stone tokens. Plus the fact that this card can't be blocked by artifact creatures. It looks like there's going to be quite a few artifact creatures running around on the battlefield in Limited, possibly Constructed too. So not bad, decent card. You know, I'm going to give it a mid rating for Limited. This is a 2-drop, and 2-drops in Limited seem to be really valuable. And the fact that you can make it larger by putting +1/+1 encounters on it, that's always a bonus. I think for now I'll give it a low rating for Constructed. Without seeing the impact in the Constructed format, like for Standard and stuff, it's hard to say how big of an impact this card will do, but I think for now, probably just give it a low for Constructed, just due to the fact that it competes with so many other efficient 2-drops. Our next common is Blanchwood Prowler for 1 and a green. It's a creature, elemental, 1/1 power and toughness. When Blanchwood Prowler enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 encounter on Blanchwood Prowler. So this is the green card in this mill 3 card cycle, where you can choose a card type and put it in your hand, or put a +1/+1 encounter on the creature. Yeah, I think this one's pretty decent. The fact that it lets you mill 3 cards, put a land in your hand, that keeps you on schedule for your land drops. And if you don't happen to hit a land card, you can at least make it a 2/2. So I think that's pretty decent. I think I'll give it a mid rating for Limited. For Constructed, probably give it a low rating. This might actually be worthy of a mid rating in Constructed if you're playing a Commander deck, maybe a tribal deck or a ramp deck or a +1/+1 counter deck, something like that. But I think in general, though, we're making the cut in most Constructed decks, unless it's got a special use. I'd probably just give it a low. So we're still on that trend of the mid for Limited and low for Constructed. Our next card is an artifact, Boulder Branch Golem for 7. Artifact creature Golem has 6/5 power and toughness. When Boulder Branch Golem enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to its power. You can pay the prototype cost, and since this is our first prototype card in this video, I'll read the reminder text. It says, you may cast this spell with different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps the abilities and types. And the cost is 3 and a green, and it enters the battlefield as a 3/3 power and toughness for its prototype cost. Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, this is it's actually not bad if you were to just cast it for its full cost. This reminds me a lot of those big green creatures that they've been printing lately that can help stabilize you in the mid to late game, and they come into play and you gain life usually. And this particular creature, it's a 7 for 6/5, and you would gain 6 life when it comes into play. Or if you played it mid game for its prototype cost, you'd make it you'd gain 3 life. So that's pretty good. I think it's a good stabilizer for mid or for a limited, and I'll give it the mid rating. Constructed, a little too beefy right now, unless you're able to cheat it out onto the battlefield. It's just a little too high for the making a constructed card slot in the deck. So give it mid rating for limited and low for constructed. Next card is Burrowing Razormaw for 2 and a green. It's a creature, beast, 4/2 power and toughness. When Burrowing Razormaw dies, mill 4 cards. So this is an interesting card. I think maybe at first glance, it seems kind of average, but there's that, I saw it quite a bit in black, where creatures in the graveyards matter, and it seems to have a natural fit with green. I believe the black-green color pair is the graveyard matter color pair that utilizes the most cards for creatures matter in your graveyard, and this is an excellent enabler for that. So I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I like the synergy it has with that deck type, and so I wouldn't mind drafting it or putting it in a seal deck, black-green seal deck. For constructed, I give it a low rating. There are other ways to get cards in your graveyard and constructed. It's just a vast library of cards to choose from. But I think for now, I'd probably just hit that low spot in constructed, but really decent and limited. Next card is Sentinel Stalwart for 1 green. It's a creature, elf, druid, soldier. 1/1 power and toughness. You can pay, or you can tap it and tap an untapped artifact or creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. Interesting. I think this card's deceptively good. It's a lot like the Aspera Sentinel that was most recently in Call Time, where you tap a creature, tap an untapped creature, and tap that to add a mana of any color. This is very similar, but you also have the option of tapping an artifact. The only drawback is it doesn't have that extra toughness, and it doesn't have reach or anything like that, but still, it's pretty good. It's pretty good 1-drop mana dork, if you will. And I think those come in pretty viable in several formats. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited and constructed. I think you'll see this used quite a bit as a good utility creature in all formats. So pretty strong card. I like it. Moving on to another common, it's Epic Confrontation for 1 and a green. It's a sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. So this is a reprint. I think this originally appeared in Dragons of Tarkir, but pretty solid. Good removal spell. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited and low rating for constructed. Definitely a card I wouldn't mind having in my deck if I'm playing green. And it's I remember playing this back when it first debuted in Dragons of Tarkir, and it performed pretty well. Worthy of a mid rating, maybe mid to high in that spectrum. For constructed, like I said, it competes with a lot of other removal spells, so it's competing for that 2 mana value slot, and probably won't make the cut in most constructed decks, but you never know. But for now, I think I'll give it a low rating. Our next card is Fog of War for 2 and a green. It's an instant. You gain 1 life for each creature on the battlefield. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures with power 3 or less. This is actually a interesting card. It's a good stabilizer for limited. Unless it's a specialized deck, I don't really see it being used that much in constructed. But Yeah, I think I'll give it a low rating, but it'd probably be at the high end of the low rating for limited. And same thing for constructed. Constructed, I'll just give it a low rating. Unless you're playing some kind of turbo fog deck or life gain deck. I think low is probably where I'd keep it for constructed. And same thing for limited. I could see it being used mid to late game where it helps you stabilize, buys you a few extra turns to mount a comeback against your opponents if you need to. Or you have something that triggers upon life gain. This is also a good card for that. So, but I'd probably leave it at low for both formats. Our next card is Gaia's Gift. It's an instant, 1 and a green. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains reach, trample, hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn. Yeah, that's pretty solid. Wow, yeah. This is a card that's right in the same vein as Take Up the Shield that was in Dominar United. Really solid card. I would definitely be happy getting this in my booster draft or Silt deck. I think I'll give it a mid rating for both limited and constructed. I could see this having constructed play as well, just due to the fact that it gives things hexproof and indestructible, reach, which is great against those annoying flyers, and trample, so you can use this on offense as well. So cool combat trick. Really efficient card for 2 mana. Give it the mid rating there. Next card is Giant Growth. Classic reprint here. For 1 green, it's an instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. This actually might be the the original combat trick. 1 green, get a +3/+3 bonus. That's solid. I give it a mid rating for both limited and constructed. In an aggro deck, this card always has a use, and definitely wouldn't mind using it in limited. And I could see myself using it in some kind of mono green stompy deck. And it's fitting that they bring this back for the Brothers War. They got quite a bit of use. I remember in some really aggressive mono green decks way back in the day during the Urza's Saga block, and I could see this also being the case for some kind of mono green stompy in constructed where Giant Growth makes a comeback. So I like it. Mid for both limited and constructed. Our next card is Gnarl Root Pallbearer for 4 and 2 green. It's a creature Treefolk Druid, 5/5 power and toughness with trample. When Gnarl Root Pallbearer enters the battlefield, target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So this is a pretty good card just by itself. You cast it, bring it into play, and give one of your other creatures that can attack +X/+X. But the fact that it also naturally fits into that Creatures Matter in the graveyard deck type, I think it's a pretty good curve topper that you could use as one of your high-end creatures in that deck. So pretty solid. And if you have some way to give your creatures haste, you could give itself a +X/+X bonus and attack for a big attack with trample. So I like it. I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, not quite sure it would make the cut in a constructed deck, maybe a commander deck, but probably, yeah, I think mid and low is probably where I see that card falling for the formats. Our next card is Hoarding Recluse for a 3 and a green. It's a creature spider, 2/3 power and toughness, has reach and death touch. When Hoarding Recluse dies, put up to 1 other target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So this is good for getting rid of cards that are annoying in your opponent's graveyard, or somehow reclaiming one of the cards that you want back in your library, so you might be able to shuffle and draw it. Plus it's got reach and death touch. That's pretty decent for stopping flyers and things like that. I wouldn't mind having this in my limited decks. I'll give it once again, give it a mid rating, and probably low for constructed. This might be something I might include in my sideboard, but probably not that often. It's just a little too big for making the cut in constructed decks. But limited, I think I'm always more than happy for a nice reach death touch creature that also has an additional utility. So I'll give it a mid rating for limited, low for constructed. Our next card is Perimeter Patrol for 2 and a green. It's a creature, human soldier, 3/3 power and toughness. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, perimeter control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. That's a pretty good rate. I mean, it's 3/3 for 3. That's pretty solid. But then also you're going to get a power bonus at each time an artifact enters the battlefield under your control. If you have some kind of open attack against your opponent after you bring an artifact into play, that could hit pretty hard. So green seems to have some pretty nice creatures so far. They're hitting pretty good in the mid rating, and I think I'll give this a mid rating as well. I wouldn't mind putting this in my deck every time, just due to the fact that you're going to be getting Power Stone tokens a lot, so this is going to get a bonus quite a bit. For constructed, probably give it a low rating. I can see it maybe fitting in a tribal deck or a commander deck, but just not something I would consistently place in my constructed decks. Our next common is a beast. It's Rust Goliath for 10. Artifact creature, construct, 10/10 power and toughness with reach and trample. It has prototypes. You can cast it for its prototype cost for a 3 and 2 green, 3/5 power and toughness. So this thing is massive. Wow. If you're able to hard cast this as a 10/10, more power to you. But you know what? With all these power tokens running around, you might be able to pull this off more than you realize. And even if you're not able to, you can still cast a 3/5 reach trample creature for 3 and 2 green. So that's pretty decent. And if you're able to cheat it onto the battlefield for its full size without having to pay the full 10, that's even better. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think it's pretty decent. I wouldn't mind having this in my limited deck, even if I just always have to cast it for its prototype cost. For constructed, I'll give it a low rating, but if you're able to cheat that, like I said, if you're able to cheat this onto the battlefield with some kind of card that you cast it for 5 and then you blink it and it comes back in as the 10/10, or if you're able to bring it back from the graveyard onto the battlefield using some kind of reanimation spell, or just a card that lets you put a card from your hand into play, this would be the card to do it with. I mean, if you're able to attack with this, your opponents need to have an answer right away for it. So really crazy, huge creature. 10/10 for 10. That's wild. Our next common is Shoot Down for 3 and a green. It's a sorcery. Exile target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Not bad. It's this is definitely a card I'd probably bring in for my sideboard, but it is a little pricey at 4. But it does exile things, so keeps things from going to the graveyard if you're playing against some kind of Graveyard Matters deck. But it also gets rid of an annoying flyer, and there's some pretty good ones out there. And of course, it can get rid of artifact or enchantment, so pretty solid. I definitely see this being as a sideboard card, just due to its cost and what it does. So I give it a low rating overall, though, for limited and constructed. I don't really see it being main decked most of the time. Our next card is Tanos' Tinkering for 3 and a green. It's an instant. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target artifact, creature, or land you control. Untap that permanent. If it isn't a creature, it becomes a 0/0 creature in addition to its other types. Yeah, that's interesting card. Plus, it has the ability to untap the creature, so it's a nice ambush card. A little pricey for a combat trick, but this might be something that you can use on your Power Stones or some kind of non-creature artifact that you want to turn into a creature. So get a surprise attack out of that, or a nice block. I think due to its cost, though, I'll go ahead and just give it a low rating. And same thing for constructed. Probably not something you'd see in constructed decks too much, but yeah, I think low is probably where I'd keep it for both limited and constructed for this card. Our next card is Tomikul Honor Guard for 1 and a green. It's a creature, human soldier, 3/1 power and toughness with ward 2. Not bad. It's an interesting take on with the ward mechanic, but it's kind of fragile. It's probably only going to survive 1 combat, or actually engage in 1 combat. I don't see it surviving unless you have some kind of combat trick. So good 2-drop though, good aggression card. But I'll give it I think I'll go low for limited, low for constructed. I mean, looks like there's some other 2-drops that might be a little better than this, but it has its uses. It could fill a slot for a 2-drop slot if you played an aggressive deck. So not entirely useless, but it's definitely a card. There are other cards I'd probably choose over this. So, but it is a soldier too. This could fit into a soldier archetype. And it might be worthy of a mid-level rating at that point. So, but overall low for both limited and constructed, just due to its fragility with that 1 toughness. Our next common is Wasteful Harvest for 2 and a green. It's an instant. Mill 5 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. It's pretty much look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put one, if it's a permanent, choose one of those cards and put it in your hand, and then put the rest in your into your graveyard. This has some nice natural synergies with the black-green Graveyard Matters deck, so that you'll probably see a lot of. So I could see this being in that type of deck. Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think it's decent enough. It digs far enough into your deck that you'll probably hit most of the time with this. And if not, if you're playing a deck where a lot of your resources are in your graveyard, this is even better. So I like that. For constructed, I think I'll give it a low rating. I know there's other cards in constructed that perform a similar function for a lesser cost, so those might be chosen over something like this. But yeah, just depends on what kind of deck you're playing. But in general, probably a low rating for constructed. Okay, so our next card is actually, we're diving into the uncommons now. Our first uncommon is Alloy Animist for 1 green. Creature Human Druid, 1/1 power and toughness. It has an activated ability of 2 and a green. Until end of turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes a 4/4 artifact creature. Yeah, that's pretty solid. 1-drop that has an animating ability for your non-creature artifacts. That's pretty solid. I like this. I could see attacking with Power Stone tokens to be a pretty common thing in limited. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing for constructed. I could see this happening a lot where you're animating your Power Stone tokens, your blood tokens, your treasure tokens, clue tokens, food tokens, any other kind of non-creature artifact, but getting some pretty good use out of animating tokens and such. So I'll go mid for limited and constructed for Alloy Animist. Next card is Audacity for 1 green. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. When Audacity is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Wow, so this is an ancestor of Rancor, which originally appeared in Urza's Legacy, I believe. Pretty decent. Although Rancor you could return to your hand. But at least this card replaces itself. If it goes to the graveyard, you're able to draw a card. I like it. Pretty solid. I'm going to give it this card I'll definitely be putting in my limited decks. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. Just a really efficient card for 1 green mana. And give it a mid rating for constructed, depending on the type of deck you're playing. Well, you know what? Actually, I'm going to also give it a high rating for constructed. I could see this where it naturally goes into an aggro deck, and you'd be more than happy to draw that card if that creature it's enchanting dies. I could see this going in almost any green deck. So solid card for Audacity. Really efficient for what it does. Next card is Blanchwood Armor for 2 and a green. Enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each forest you control. So this is a reprint from sets from long ago. Can't remember the set exactly that it was reprinted from, but yeah, it's pretty solid card. Definitely good and limited. If you're playing green, you'll probably include this all the time. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, not quite making the cut. Unless you're going to be playing a mono green deck, then this might be worthy of a mid or high rating. But yeah, it's a solid card. Not quite like Audacity, but the card we previously previewed, but pretty decent. And for limited, back to limited, I think it's it's something, if I'm playing green, I'm going to have a lot of forests, so I don't mind having this in there. And this could become quite the problem for your opponent if they don't have an answer for the creature it's on. Next up is Bushwhack for 1 green. It's a sorcery. You can choose one. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Yeah, it's a solid card. This is good mana fixing, and also a removal spell. I like this. I'm going to give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. I could definitely see this in a constructed deck where you could conceivably take a 1 or 2 land hand and not have to mulligan if you have this in your hand, because this is essentially like getting drawing another land, but it's a land of your choice. So, plus it's an efficient removal spell that you can use to get rid of one of your opponent's creatures by having one of your creatures fight it. So, pretty solid card at an uncommon slot. I think I'll give it a high rating across the board. Next card is Cradle Clearcutter for 6. It's an artifact creature golem. 3/6 power and toughness, and it says tap, add an amount of green equal to Cradle Clearcutter's power. It has a prototype cost of 2 and a green, and it's a 1/3 power and toughness. Interesting. This will probably be the best if you were able to cast it for its full cost. But that being said, if you have enough mana to cast it for its full cost, probably not going to need to be adding 3 to your mana pool as often as you might think. However, for big creatures, this definitely could help in combination with Power Stone tokens. It would allow you to get your prototype stuff out a lot quicker. So maybe it is pretty decent. And for the prototype cost, it just becomes kind of an expensive mana dork. I'm gonna just give it a mid rating for limited. I think for constructed, I'll kind of give it a low rating. I don't know if it would make the cut that often in constructed. For limited, I might throw 1 copy in my deck. It's a good blocker, got a decent body to it, so that could be something. Just depends on what you have in your hand at the time. But yeah, we'll go mid for limited, low for constructed. Our next uncommon is Phalagi Excavation for 3 and 2 green. It's a sorcery. Create 3 tapped Power Stone tokens and you gain 3 life. Definitely good for ramping, I'll tell you that. Ramping out big artifact creatures and stuff. Plus, there's a little bit of life gain, so that might stabilize you in the mid-game if you need it. It's hard to say. Still don't know the entire impact of Power Stone tokens, so... I think I'm going to just give it a mid rating for limited. It does give you Power Stone tokens that lets you ramp artifact creatures or non-artifact creatures or pay for activated abilities, and it gives you life gain. But for constructed, I think it's a solid low. Not something I would see in a constructed deck that often, unless you're playing maybe a commander deck with a lot of artifacts. Our next card is Gaia's Courser for 4 and a green. It's a creature, Centaur Soldier, 4/5 power and toughness. And whenever a Gaia's Corsair attacks, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, draw a card. That's pretty good. Even in a deck that doesn't have the Graveyard Matters theme going, most oftentimes you're going to have 3 creature cards in your graveyard by mid to late game, and this has that attack trigger each time, so that's pretty good that you're drawing a card. I'll give it a mid rating for limited, and I think I'll do the same for constructed. This might find its way into some constructed decks, but I really like the fact that it does, each time it attacks, if you have 3 creatures in your graveyard, you draw a card. It's not just one time, so that can get pretty wild and keep you in the game, mid to late game. So fair sized body for 5 too. So yeah, I think it's a solid card. Give it a mid rating. I would definitely like to have it in my limited deck for sure. Next card is Haywire Might for 1 green. It's an artifact creature, insect, 1/1 power and toughness. When Haywire Might dies, you gain 2 life. And then you can pay 1 and sacrifice Haywire Might to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Yeah, this has got some pretty good use to it. When it dies, you gain the 2 life, and you can exile an artifact or enchantment that's pretty annoying, that's both non-creatures. There are plenty of artifacts and enchantments that could be annoying that you really want to get rid of, and this is a good answer for it. cheap and efficient. Give it a mid rating for limited and constructed. I could see this being used in both formats. I could see this being brought in from the sideboard in a constructed deck quite often. Same thing for limited. Yeah, it's just a good utility creature as a 1-drop and just the cheap activation cost of one green. So I like it. Give it a mid rating. The next card is Iron Craw Crusher for 7, artifact creature worm. Its regular power and toughness is 4/6, and whenever Iron Craw Crusher attacks, target attacking creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is Iron Craw Crusher's power. And it has a prototype cost of 2 and 2 green, and it's a 2/5 power and toughness. Yeah, I mean, if you're able to cast this for its full cost and then attack with it, you could conceivably give itself, make it an 8/6 when it attacks. Same thing, it would attack as a 4/5 if you gave itself its own bonus with the prototype version. Or you can do it to another creature, and that's pretty good when you're attacking with it. So I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, just not something I would see make a constructed cut that often. Maybe in a commander deck, or some kind of artifact creature dedicated artifact deck. But I think for now, go mid for limited, low for constructed. Next card is Mask of the Jade Crafter for 2. It's an artifact. You can pay X and tap it and sacrifice Mask of the Jade Crafter. Create an XX colorless golem artifact creature token. Activate only as a sorcery, and it has Unearth for 2 and a green. The fact that you can only use it as a sorcery, though, that kind of stinks. But and it's an X spell. You know, this is actually a good mana sink for all your Power Stone tokens, so that's something to keep in mind. And you could do it again with Unearth. Aside from that, though, if you don't have a lot of Power Stone tokens, it might sit around for a while. But I give it a mid rating for limited. This is a card that could be useful. And the fact that you get to use it again with Unearth, that's a redeeming quality for it. So I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. Constructed, don't really see it happening that often being used. I could see it in a commander deck, but in a regular standard or modern deck, not really something I would see making the cut that often. Next card is Obstinate Baloth for 2 and 2 green. It's a creature, beast, 4/4 power and toughness. When Obstinate Baloth enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. If a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Obstinate Baloth, put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. This is actually this is a reprint card. I think originally appeared in M11. This is your trump to Liliana of the Veil. Go ahead, make me discard a card. I'll just throw this onto the battlefield and gain 4 life. That'll be an interesting backfire for your opponents playing black. So, yeah, this is a nice sideboard card tech against Liliana. Even if you're not using it against somebody with heavy discard effects, it's still a decent card for 4 mana, 4-drop, 4/4, plus you gain 4 life. I like it. I think I'll be playing this every time in limited if I'm playing green, and I give it a mid rating for constructed. This is something that, I mean, if you're bringing it in from the sideboard against a heavy discard deck, I would call this a high rating card, just because you're just going to wreck their day bringing this in and putting it on the battlefield. But overall, in general, probably just a mid rating for constructed. Could serve its purpose in Beast Tribal deck or something like that, but not always making the cut, but it could some of the time. So yeah, I think we'll go high for limited, mid for constructed. Next card is Sarenth Steelseeker for 1 and a green. It's a creature, human artificer scout, 1/2 power and toughness. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it is a land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put that card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So there's some artifact synergies there, and if you can put a land into your hand, or you just put it into your graveyard, or you may put it into your graveyard. I think this is a build-around card. This is something that really needs a lot of things to go well for it in the build-around to make it really work. But in general, this is not something I'd be using all the time. So I think I'll give it a low rating for limited. Low for constructed, but if this is a build-around card that you had the synergies to really make this card fire off, I'd give it a mid rating. for both limited and constructed, but in general, I think I'll give it a low rating. So we're moving on to the rares now, and our first rare is Fade from History, for 2 and 2 green. It's a sorcery. Each player who controls an artifact or enchantment creates a 2/2 green bear creature token, then destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Well, first off, this is a pretty cool looking card. Those bears are pretty cute, just playing around on some old oxidized artifact. That's kind of neat, seeing the seeing those. But as far as the card goes, yeah, this is good. This is a good card for wiping out a bunch of artifacts or enchantments that are causing you trouble. In standard, this would be a bye-bye Celestia enchantments. This just wipe out that deck altogether. Good sideboard tech. I think because it does have that, I mean, this is almost definitely a sideboard tech card, so something I'd probably have to bring in from the sideboard to be useful. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to play out in limited and how many artifacts there will be, but could be quite a few, could be a little bit. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited without knowing how that plays out, but I could see it where it does wipe out some artifacts and each player gets or artifacts or enchantments and each player gets a 2/2 bear creature token. For constructed, this is almost purely a sideboard card, so I'll probably give it a mid rating. It can be pretty destructive against cards that are decks that depend on artifacts and enchantments. So it's definitely something you'd want to have in your sideboard if you're playing green. But it's not something I'd main deck. And because of that, I would probably give it a mid rating. It's too good to give it a low rating, but not good enough to be a high rating. So we'll go mid across the board for limited and constructed. Next card is Fauna Shaman for 1 and a green. It's a creature, Elf Shaman, 2/2 power and toughness. You can pay 1 green and tap it. Discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is a reprint from M11 as well, I believe. And this fits naturally with that Creatures Matter in your graveyard strategy. So I would definitely like this card. This is solid. Helps feed that engine. And yeah, this definitely has some good uses. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited and constructed. I think it is a solid card that can help you get to your useful creatures that you need. And if you're playing a Reanimator deck, this just feeds your graveyard. So pretty solid card. I like it. It was strong back when it first debuted, and I think this will be strong again. Our next card is Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, for 2 and a green. It's a legendary creature, Elf Druid Scout. 2/3 power and toughness, and you can tap it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, and untap it. Yeah, that's pretty solid. Yeah, this is a cool card, and this is feeding into that big mana spell stuff that I'm starting to see amongst the artifact mana generation and in green as well. So this will let you cast some really big things, including the prototype cards. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited, and same thing for constructed. I see this having a lot of uses, and if you're casting those big prototype creatures for their full cost, you're going to get that +1/+1 counter trigger on this most of the time, being able to untap it. And if you're able to untap it, you can use it again to add more mana to your mana pool to cast more creatures. And that could also just create a continuous engine with this card. So I like it. Pretty solid card. A lot of uses that you can get out of it. Next card is Perennial Behemoth for 5. It's an artifact creature, beast, 2/7 power and toughness. You may play land cards from your graveyard. That's cool. Unearth for 2 green. Yeah, this card's basically Crucible of Worlds on a stick. And the fact that it has Unearth, that's pretty good. Just by itself, for 5, it's a 2/7, so it's got a big back end that can be used to block or quite often, so your opponents are going to have trouble getting through. I think this card is going to be, yeah, you can get a lot of uses out of this, especially if you're milling stuff into your graveyard. and you need to get some of your lands back. This fits naturally into the Soul of Windgrace deck, the Jund Windgrace deck. So that's a bonus there. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited, and same thing for constructed. I think you're going to be able to find uses for it in both formats, and I think it'll serve its purpose. It'll be well worth the 5 mana you spend to get it onto the battlefield. So yeah, we'll go high rating for limited and constructed for Perennial Behemoth. Our next card is Simian Simulacrum for 3 artifact creature ape, 2/1 power and toughness. When Simian Simulacrum enters the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 encounters on target creature you control. It has Unearth for 2 and 2 green. So you could actually put it on itself, the +1/+1 encounters, making it a 4/3 for 3. And you could also Unearth, giving another bonus to some other creatures. Be interesting to see how this slots in a deck. I think for limited, I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. I could see this being used quite a bit and it would definitely make a cut in any kind of green deck or even artifact creature deck. For constructed, I think I'll probably give it a mid rating. It'll have its uses, but it won't slot into every deck. But yeah, pretty decent 3-drop. Next card is Teething Wormlet for 1 green. It's a creature worm, 1/1 power and toughness. Teething Wormlet has Death Touch as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Teething Wormlet. So basically you have to have 3 artifacts for it to have Death Touch, but the first time an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you'll get the +1/+1 counter, and each time an artifact enters the battlefield, you'll gain a life. That's a lot going on for just a 1 green 1-drop. Yeah, I like it. This is gonna happen a lot because you're gonna be having those Power Stone tokens to feed this. So this is something that's pretty decent. I give it high rating for limited, and for same thing for constructed. In constructed, you're gonna have an opportunity to get more artifacts into play with other types of tokens and non-creature artifacts and artifact creatures. So this is a decent card that could get pretty big pretty quickly. So we'll go high for limited and constructed. Next card is Titania's Command. It's for 4 and 2 green. It's a sorcery. You can choose 2. Exile target player's graveyard. You gain 1 life for each card exiled this way. Wow, that's pretty wild. You can search your library for up to 2 land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Create 2/2 green bear creature tokens, and then put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Wow. This is pretty powerful. 6 mana cost sorcery. The fact that you get to choose 2. It totally wrecks that black-green Graveyards Matter archetype card or deck type. So gotta watch out for that if you're playing that. Watch out for Titania's Command. Really good for ramping. Really good for creating some bear tokens. And actually, it creates those bear tokens, and then you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on each of them, so they'd come into play as 4/4s. So that's really solid. I like this card. I think this is a really, for 6 mana, it's worth its cost. I'll give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. Really solid card. Lots of utility, lots of good uses out of it, and I could see it being used in quite a few different deck types. So we're moving on to the Mythics now, and our first Mythic is Awaken the Woods for X and 2 green. It's a sorcery. Create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens, and in parentheses it says they're affected by summoning sickness. Yeah, this card's pretty wild. I mean, this card just screams big mana. The fact that you're paying X to put X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens, it's basically paying X to put X forests into place. You can tap all those for mana, plus they're 1/1 creatures as well. This is solid. You could probably do some really crazy things with this card in constructed. It's going to find its good uses in limited as well. I'm going to give it an epic rating for both limited and constructed. I'm afraid to think of what some of the players are going to be able to figure out for constructed with this card. Might be some infinite combos in the waiting, and that could be pretty scary. But it's going to find good uses in both formats. If I got this card in my draft or sealed deck, I would definitely have it in there. Yeah, this could actually win you the game outright if you're able to have enough mana to cast it. And same thing for constructed. A lot of great uses for it. So epic all across the board. Just a really cool card. Our next mythic is Rootwire Amalgam for 5. It's an artifact creature golem, 5/5 power and toughness. Its regular text box says pay 3 and 2 green and sacrifice Rootwire Amalgam. Create an XX colorless golem artifact creature token where X is 3 times Rootwire Amalgam's power. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Wow, that's really powerful. You can pay, so you're basically paying 5 and sack it to get a 15/15 artifact creature golem that has haste. That's nuts. And it has a prototype cost of 1 and a green, and it's a 2/3 power and toughness. So if you were to sacrifice it while it's its prototype version, it would come into play as a 6/6 hasty artifact creature golem. Yeah, that's pretty solid. If you have a way to give it trample or something like that, that can get pretty nuts for your opponents. So I like it. I'm also going to give this an epic rating for both limited and constructed, especially if you're able to do it for its regular cost. Not necessarily the prototype slot, but for the regular version, a big 15/15 hasty creature. Watch out. Yeah, it's going to get out of hand pretty quick. So yeah, we'll go epic for limited and constructed for Rootwire Amalgam. So I believe this is our final mythic, and this is Titania, Voice of Gaia for 1 and 2 green. Legendary creature elemental. It has 3/4 power and toughness. It has reach. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more land cards in your graveyard and you both own and control Titania, Voice of Gaia, and a land named Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, exile them, then meld them into Titania, Gaia Incarnate. Yeah, this card's really solid. It has perfect natural synergy with Soul of Windgrace, so I could see this being in that deck. That's going to be something that you're going to see a lot in standard constructed. For limited, pretty good too. Your lands go to your graveyard in limited. You're going to get pretty good use out of it. I think I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. This is something that you'll probably be able to get some decent use out of. For constructed, I think I'll give it a high rating as well. There's some decks that make some really good use out of this card. Now, this is one part of the meld creatures. I will actually review the backside of this card when we review the Argoth Sanctum of Nature for the lands, and we'll do a complete review of the meld creature. So I think we'll go high for limited, high for constructed for Titania, Voice of Gaia. So that concludes all the green cards for the Brothers War, for both reviewing it for limited and constructed. Next up, we're going to be doing all the multicolored cards, and I know that'll be kind of fun. There'll be a few multicolored cards that are the second half of the meld creatures, so we'll be able to review the full meld card in that coming up. So until then, hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the channel and you like the video, subscribe to my channel, MTG Rogue Players, and hit that like button. Leave a comment if you like. I'm always interacting with my audience, and it's fun to hear from people. But until the next video with the multicolored, we will see you next time, everybody. Take care.